I got a question about the nutrition stuff. Like, there's so many diets out there that, like you kind of mentioned Tom Brady. I was already thinking he had his own special
Hmm.
diet as well. All these other diets like keto or carnivore or whatever all these are. Do you think some of them are just kind of not the best? Because I know you said Tom Brady. You said that's not the approach you would take, but it worked for him because it's all individualized. Like, are there some out there that just overall you think would not be really beneficial, or do you think all of these other diets have their place and have this their purpose for that certain person?
That is an outstanding question because you let me get right to the heart of the matter on that kind of with one swoop. So at the end of the day, if it's a keto diet, a carnivore diet, there's the high carb diet. Joe Binley's a friend of mine, and so the high carb diet, there or candy diet as they call it, but I just call it high carb diet. You've got Mediterranean diets, you've got vegan diet. Take the vegan diet out of it because there are moral and ethical reasons that are motivating those individuals to make those choices, and you want to respect that. So you leave that out. I'm just talking about things that are similar.
Mm-hmm.
All these types of diets, at the end of the day, do their thing because of their actions on the body's, at the end of the day, insulin system. So it's either reducing the body's insulin response or it's engaging the body's insulin response. But at the core, that is what those diets are all doing. In the case of carnivore or keto, you minimal carbohydrate, obviously, so minimal impact as far as insulin release. Notice I didn't say none, because anything you eat still creates some sort of an insulin response. You can just eat like a hamburger, just the meat, and check your blood sugar afterwards, and it will go up. It just doesn't go up much. You might have been 80, you eat your hamburger, and maybe you're at like 93. So minimal, and then it comes back down to your baseline. But all of these different diets, at the end of the day, do their thing because of how they influence the actions of insulin. GLPs, right? That's all the rage. So all your GLP-1s and all these things that are out there, how do they work? Same thing. They're influencing the actions of insulin. They're either A, influencing the actions of insulin through slowing gastric emptying, because the rate that your digestive system processes food greatly influences your insulin response. So you're drastically slowing and kind of like going into stealth mode. You're trying to like eat the food and just have it trickle out into the system to kind of not wake mom and dad up because you came in past midnight, so to speak. That's how they're working. And some of them also increase your body's insulin sensitivity. So that's kind of a twofold approach. But every diet does its thing because of, ultimately, when it's all said and done, how it influenced the actions of insulin in the body. So I don't necessarily think that any one of those diets is bad or good or different. I would first look at it from the perspective of the person's lifestyle. If carnivore or keto or the high carb diet or whatever these things are, if that works within that person's lifestyle, so this is when they wake up, this is when they go to bed, do they work shift work? Are they a police officer? Are they a firefighter? All these things that can influence their ability to be consistent, right? Consistency influences the actions of insulin in the body. Every single thing you do influences that. And so there's no right or wrong diet for an individual from that perspective, as much as I feel there is what is the right diet that will enable you to be consistent and to be successful within your lifestyle, within your marriage, within your family dynamics. Do you have kids that one has to go to soccer, and then an hour later this one has to go to volleyball, and then an hour later the twins have to go to football practice? Like, okay, but then how's the accessibility of your diet fall into your lifestyle? If you can pull that off with your carnivore, your keto, because you're a hardcore meal prepper and you stay up late at night maybe, and your lifestyle, even though it's that dynamic, you can still get it done, that's great. But if you're an individual that needs to be able to make a choice on the go or on the run, or you're out and you're in between checking on grandma and running the two kids to volleyball, then that's probably not the right diet for you. Probably you need that variety to where you have the freedom and you can make better educated choices for what you have to work with. So I'm big on that because so many people think through marketing and diets getting fancy names and all this stuff that they can't be successful because they can't afford to eat like that. And it's really not about that. It's about your lifestyle. You can be successful. Don't worry about, it's actually about what you can make do with how you can make it work. It's like I tell people, there's a good, better, best when it comes to diets. Best, if you can afford to hit the organic and the grass-fed and the grass-finished and the microgreens, if you can make that your lifestyle and that is perfectly in sync for you, by all means, do that. If that is cost prohibitive for you and just time-wise and accessibility-wise it makes no sense, then that's probably not the way to go. And then maybe you can't do the best, but you can do the good. And maybe the good involves you're rolling through a Culver's and getting a grilled chicken breast sandwich, throwing away the buns, but you're getting your chicken that way. Is it pumped up? Is it got some goodies in it? Absolutely. Is it sure a hell of a lot better than nothing? And it's sure a hell of a lot better than not trying at all and just being, fuck it, I can't be successful because it's either got to be the microgreens, the grass-fed, the grass-finished, or I cannot be. That's not true. We know from back in our day, right? Like, how many guys that were big and strong as a bull and they ate like off-brand boxes of macaroni and cheese and the cheapest ground beef they could get?
All of them. There
we go. And that's really at the truth of what all of it is. Everybody can, to quote Brian, be great, but everybody, I just really hope that if I do anything in this exposure or with my life's work of my career or whatever, I hope if anybody takes anything away, it's that everybody can be the very best that they can be. Tune out all that outside noise and all that whatever. Focus on your lifestyle, and then after you've focused on your lifestyle and you've identified what your morning, noon, night, and workout looks like, then put those food choices in around that. To focus on protein. You don't need me to tell you that, but protein, carbohydrates, fats, but focus on your lifestyle and make that work, and don't get caught up in all the noise of, it's got to be the tenderloin, or you just can't make it in this go. You can't be successful without the can't be strong, Dave, without tenderloin and microgreens.
Yeah. If we spin this back into performance, and you've been around a long time, so we're not super old, but old enough to have seen a lot of things come and go. And we've spoken a lot about insulin, and we've seen insulin come on the scene in the past decade to be used as a PD. It's probably being used before.
90s was a big emergence.
Yeah, it's a big thing. And one thing I've always wondered with that is when it's in the performance and the strength athlete sector is typically when you see the protocols that will be implemented for that, it's a change of their diet, right? Because if it's intra or if it's post or whatever it is, the carbohydrates are always associated with it. It's kind of how it falls in there. In progress, it makes a difference, right? It's without a question, it makes a huge difference. But, and you would know this, what if they didn't use the insulin, but just manipulated the carbohydrates the way that they were doing without the insulin? You see what I'm saying? It's is insulin the bait, that makes them do what they should have been doing the first time? Yeah. But it may not have to be the same number of carbs, right? Because the insulin are going to shuttle a higher amount of carbs. But half of that, from what they were doing from the start, right? Because you see where I'm going with that?
1,000%. Because at the end of the day, enhancing your body's own ability to receive nutrition is where it starts and stops. With any diet, with any approach, with super supplements, with insulin, it is enhancing your body's ability to be extremely efficient. Making the right diet choices, you can do that on your own. You can train your body to be more sensitive to the actions of insulin. And it's not by how most people think. Back to the carnivore and keto and that type of stuff, again, everything has its place, it has its influence, and it's successful when it comes to weight loss because it's kind of putting the body's insulin response to sleep, like giving it a nap for a while you're on that diet, more or less. But the problem that you have is that when you take a situation like that, you're untraining the body. So in my world, I'm training my guys to be hyper responsive to the actions of insulin through exposure to insulin, through exposure to carbohydrates. Because like anything in life, we get good at things through repetition, or we get good at things in life not by walking around and avoiding it. Like whoever got great at their job because they like avoided going to work every day. Mm-hmm. Like you got to go through that door, right? And then do your shit and then bump. Hopefully you get better at what you do. Most individuals, after they come out of carnivore or keto, they'll try to have even just a moderate, normal, responsible amount of carbohydrates introduced into their day, and they cannot handle it at all. Their blood glucose levels shoot up into, and I'll call it a fake diabetic level because they're not truly diabetic at that point, but a fake diabetic level. Mark, if you remember, so Mark had been doing his running, and when he was kind of transitioning out of the keto thing and carnivore and stuff, he had made a post or whatever because I had responded to him, wishing him well, making sure he was all right. But he had found himself in the hospital because he had just a bizarre blood sugar reading that wasn't true. But it was just the body there's no other term. The body temporarily forgot what the fuck to do with the carbohydrate, And so his blood glucose levels just went up high, and that's what commonly happens to individuals. So it's kind of like you when you're coming back out of the weight cut, and it's kind of like slowly, progressively getting back into things. That's the right way of doing it and how you can get around that. But to Dave's question, ultimately, it's, do you need to take exogenous? Again, I have been using and exposed to insulin from an athletic capacity since the 90s, the early 90s. And so, I mean, there, any way it can or cannot, we learn a lot from our mistakes.
Yeah. Any
way it can or cannot be used and implemented, I have been down that road. So it doesn't matter if you're talking about, using it per meal, if you're talking about going the Lantus-Levermeer aspect and, while you sleep, the long acting to give yourself a base or foundation. It's like, or couldn't we just time our nutrient delivery as we eat and control our exposure to carbohydrates and maximize our ability to make use of those carbohydrates through other assisted means, such as timing it, prior to training. Why? Well, because then that training through the pump is going to, from the muscle contractions, is going to help clear glucose from the system. The enhanced oxygenation of being active is also going to have an impact. Your insulin will have its impact. You can put a lot of things to work for you to take care of business on your own. And yet you don't find yourself in this situation of boxing yourself into a corner, because what happens at the end of the day, you get less sensitive to the actions of insulin by the more constant your exposure to circulating insulin in the blood is. So if you have a baseline of exogenous, floating through your system, long-acting insulin, your cells are exposed to that constantly. The receptors, the insulin receptors, just like anything in life, you expose something over and over and over again, your body gets dull to it. So it's diminishing returns. And every single individual who's ever utilized that will attest to, at first, I don't want to give the numbers because I just don't want people getting out there getting frisky on their own, so to speak, without guidance. But you start at this level, and that's okay for a couple of weeks. Like, wow, this might be the greatest thing ever. And then all of a sudden, man, nothing really happened. So then it goes up a little bit, and then it goes up a little bit, and it goes up a little. And the next thing you know, I mean, the amounts that you end up at, even by diabetic standards, for a true type 1 diabetic would be considered, God damn, that's a lot of fucking insulin. Mm-hmm. Because you're consistently untraining your body to be responsive to the actions of insulin, because it's just so saturated in there that it's not getting through anymore. The receptors are dull. The body's not actually having to respond much on its own. And then you've got that whole cascade of other effects that happen, because you've got cortisol. So you've got somebody already with very high circulating levels of insulin. And then let's say maybe GH is in the equation. Well,
it will be if the
yep,
insulin
exactly.
So
it has to be because you're creating a fake, if you will, diabetic environment. So at the end of the day, exactly like you said, can't you just end up in the same spot? So let's say everybody started off at A, two groups of people. Group A starts off manipulating their body's own response to insulin through nutrition and timing of activities and things like that, and trying to maximize their sleep and, taking into consideration, though, factors like heat, which also has a profound impact on reducing your sensitivity to insulin. But you have this individual who's focused on manipulating everything on their own here, and then you have individual B who's just going to take it. At the end of the day, by the time Group A finds themselves, let's say, up to letter D in the alphabet, Group B's ahead. Group B is going to find themselves, probably about K. But then it's like tortoise in the hare. Then it's going to be like, Then it's going to take a long time to get to L, to get to M, because all the response time and all the sensitivity is just greatly reducing as you're going along. Meanwhile, this one is actually increasing. Group A is increasing their sensitivity to insulin and carbohydrates all along. So Group B is reducing. Group A is actually increasing. So they're now speeding up, passing them and leaving them in the dust, basically.
That's a great analogy for that. Mm-hmm. Now, I can say that the Group A later down the line can throw in, is...
Yeah, and that's true too. Through, again, timing, and because what have they done? They have created themselves to be a hyper responder.
Yes.
And I think in the end of the day, we all want to ultimately find ourselves a hyper responder, either to training or to nutrition in any way, shape, or form. So when you find that, then that's a whole other world, because you've taken the time to focus on technique or form, or in this case, nutrition.
Yeah, all the basic stuff is there for it to actually be utilized at that higher capacity. Mm-hmm. But that's always been a strange one to me, because that scenario usually isn't the case, in the demographic that I'm in. Mm-hmm. It is going to be that B group, to where the diet was kind of a train wreck to begin with. Mm-hmm. And then they'll start that, and then all of a sudden the diet all cleans up, that all goes in there, and the same scenario that you just plays out.
Well, in my world too. Now, again, keep in mind, I will absolutely recognize and respect that bodybuilding is a completely different animal, because like I did the last time, show and go. Mm-hmm. And my pro bodybuilder friends will be the first thing to say, fuck all, ain't no way I can physically exert myself and train like a strongman for 3 or 4 hours, which is how long strongman training sessions are. Not possible. My strongman guys can. But there comes that point where at the end of the day, when it comes just to like a strongman and that type of a situation, your ability to have a say in everything you do should be paramount. And I feel that should be the outlook when you're trying to decide what decisions you make regarding anything. Could be super supplements, could be food, could be nutrition. The moment you find yourself where there's a lot left to chance, you're in trouble. And I guess I'm a control freak, but when it comes to my athletes, I cannot tolerate leaving things to chance. I need to know I have a very predictable response that I'm going to get to, that also has a margin for curve, a curve to it, because I know goddamn good and well, nothing in this world ever goes exactly to plan, no matter what your intentions are. And so I've got to be able to operate off that curve, but through a very predictive response by the time I hit that curve. When you are in a situation where it's exogenous, such as the bodybuilding type of world, that can't work in the strongman world doing that, because the second you find variables that are out of your control, like, oh yes, I'm going to measure it because I'm going to have this amount of carbs, so I'm going to take this amount of insulin with it. There, I did my thing. Yes, you did. Guess what? You're outside on that day that you've done that, and it's a 100-degree day and high humidity and sunshine. Guess what? The response is not going to be what you thought it was going to be. And in fact, you literally have lost all control. And this is going to go however this goes. And you better have some countermeasures ready, because that individual, because of the effects of the sun and the heat, is either going to end up way too high because they're going to be so incredibly resistant to the actions of that insulin, or on rare occasions in that situation, they're going to end up too low. And usually that's the combination of how they exerted themselves. But like say in the bodybuilding world, that doesn't necessarily happen. But you can't have a strength athlete who's out there and they're doing things that are all artificially propped up, and then the weather factor comes in, or the downtime factor comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's say they're like, okay, start time is at noon, everybody warm up, and everybody warms up, and then it rains. I've been there. I've done that repeatedly. It rains, and we're in a 2-hour rain delay. God bless the individual who's not doing things through manipulating the food to get those results, because he is literally in a free-for-all on whatever's going to take place. He has lost all control, and it's going to go how it goes. Whereas I can fine-tune, and I can be very precision-based because it's all manipulating that individual's response. I'm not just manipulating a drug, because at the end of the day, that's what insulin is. You know, when you take a drug and it can't do its job, it's no different than if somebody was dehydrated and needed an IV bag, and you didn't put the fucking needle in. So the IV bag is just hanging there with the hose flopping in the wind. It's that same sort of a thing. Nothing can happen because you've put yourself in a position where you can't respond. Diabetics find themselves in trouble all the time because they'll have something as simple as an apple on a hot day and go outside in the sun to watch the grandkids play catch in the yard, and their blood sugar levels will go to 200 off a fucking apple. 30, 40 grams of carbs. And they'll be the first ones to say, well, that never happens. Yep, never happens. Because it happened to be a sunny day. The sun was out. It was a hot day. All those things drastically impact the body when it comes to how it's receptive to the actions of insulin.